Hello and welcome. This is going to be a build overview of Poison Skeleton Archers. I've posted enough videos and I just feel like finally doing an overview on it. I'm going to go over everything important. Going to talk first. I do have some experience with, with a lot of minion builds, but I played Poison SRS before, and as of the time of this video in this league 3.22, Poison SRS is, still the meta, and probably has the highest top end, probably has better potential than this build, to be honest, if you spend a lot on it, right? I'm gonna say my experience with it this league, I've had very on and off chances to play. Every time I come and play, I spend more time just kind of grinding, and I'll talk about the farming that it's been good at and where it's gotten at this point. There's more value worth of items equipped here than you actually need to get similar results. Like, for example, I've got a level 4 Enlighten. I didn't need to buy that. I was rolling with a level 3 forever, and then I just slotted it in, and it's nice to have a little extra mana, but it's not necessary. So at this point, character has gotten to level 99, and that's due to the fact that it's just been extremely comfy, even in very dangerous maps. With the only mod I'm avoiding is the cannot regenerate, just because I hate it. It's less fun to have to swap out one of my flasks. For defenses, they don't look too amazing, but it comes out to a very comfy result in these juiced farming scenarios. We're basically just kind of spreading out and getting a little bit of everything. So we've got spell suppression lucky and stacking a bit of spell suppression here and there. If you put more money into the rares, you could definitely crank those numbers up. We've got some block, 2248, thanks to Tempest Shield, and putting our resists up to 79, 80, 78, 78, and room for some extra chaos resist, which is always nice to have. And you don't quite need to get to this level, and you could push it further with a lot more investment, which I have not. I farmed up a bunch of money that I don't even want to take the time to spend on upgrades. I'm sure there's a lot that can be done with 100 divs. So this build centers around Skeleton Archers. You get Skeleton Archers from the Phantasmal gem if you haven't played with them before. They're very different from the melee skeletons. And the number one thing you'll notice if you try to play around with them in Path of Building is that they have like a third of the damage of melee skeletons. So it looks terrible in PoB. But if you're like me and you just kind of want to play them, see what they're like, they've got a lot of advantages. And the primary advantage is going to be that they are extremely damage efficient. They have a pretty wide range. Like, they could shoot anything on this screen except maybe something around here. They will have to walk over a little bit, but all you have to do is just summon them a little closer. Before I get to the gems, I'll talk a little bit more. You'll see on my channel there's some uber boss kills. Cyrus just now, that was super clean. Uber duper elder, uber shaper. I've never done Uber Cortex, I just don't feel like it. And Uber Maven I hate. The damage was alright. I was doing the mechanics fine, but I just hate that, and maybe I suck. I didn't try more than one Uber Maven. Regular Maven, I can just walk all over. So for the farming strategy this league, when I could play, I was just doing Incursion. And main reason was that I was trying to corrupt my own level 21 Val Gem, which I finally did. I got 2 of them. 2 of them in a row out of like 100 attempts or something. And then I just started selling the temples. So Incursion is a big clear speed check, especially in high density maps with like 8 mods and 130% quantity, and go with Eater of Worlds and Conqueror maps. Just crank it up with some delirious 20-40%, whatever you're comfortable with. It could probably, I just didn't want to waste the Deli Orbs, but felt like it could push up to 80 or maybe even 100% and still be fine. But even when it was less optimized, which it's not quite that optimized, to be honest, we've got more attributes than we need, and resists are more like, we got way too much cold and lightning. We don't need that much. Maybe if I get double cursed, whatever. So you could make things a lot tighter here on this build. I wanted to play whenever I had a chance. I didn't want to just shop and get every little perfect optimal choice. So even when it was less optimized and a much smaller budget and still building and figuring it out, it still felt really good with that farming strategy. The main difference between skeleton archers and melee skeletons isn't just that they shoot at a range. I mean, that's where it all comes from, but they stay alive so much more easily. And we do have minion taunt, on this jewel right here. So they're taunting from range, but our specters and golem are taunting more, and they're melee and they're in the way, and they have more taunt from meat shield. So what ends up happening most of the time is the archers are untouched. They just stay where you summon them, and the specters and the golem do all the tanking. And the golem's easy to resummon. You just want to make sure you've got the resists capped, and we use this wheel for some extra fizz and to get that minion defense mastery, crank up their max resists +8. And the specters stay alive pretty well. These are Pale Seraphims. It might be more optimal to mix in some of the other supports, and I just don't believe the uptime is that good. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just decided to go with all 4 Pale Seraphims. I just want to make sure that debuff's on it all the time, and it seems to work out. Might get a little bit more if you go the other way. Sorry, I don't have this really scripted out. This build is going to center around Skeletal Atrophy. Really an incredible node you can get from the minion large cluster. You could go for one of the fancy 12 socket large clusters with the 35% increased effect in minion attack speed, cast speed. I didn't find that good, and you want at least one Skeletal Atrophy anyway. And then Call to the Slaughter is extremely good value as well, because you want to keep resummoning. They will clear things, and so you'll just move and resummon and move and resummon, and if there's a big pack, you drop all 3. And for clear speed, you're using Pierce and Volley, so you've just got this wall of archers just destroying everything from their angle, and that lets you kind of pick the direction of where your damage is going, which is very convenient. Me D&D real quick. For bosses, you're going to switch to a couple other gems, and this one I'll talk about a lot more. But Skeletal Atrophy, first off, converting 30% to chaos, extremely powerful. 10% wither chance is not quite enough. You want at least 3 Skeletal Atrophies. I ended up springing for 4. You have to get a Megalomaniac, and you'll see that's Sublime Form for mana reservation efficiency, and then Skeletal Atrophy, and over here, a different aura. Malevolence is the one you want the mana reservation efficiency on the most. I went for the 4th Mega because I didn't ever get the Helmet enchant. And I would say it's not necessary to get 4 Skeletal Atrophies. 30% Wither combined with Temp Chains is enough for 100%, 15% uptime, but it stacks faster with a higher percent chance, and cuts down on that ramp time, which I think is beneficial, but I'm sure it won't make a difference. You just want to hit 3 for sure. So in order to hit 3, you're going to spread out and get 2 minion clusters. These are fairly easy to craft and cheap to buy on trade. You'll notice Feasting Fiends. This specific setup of Call to the Slaughter, Feasting Fiends, and Skeletal Atrophy, I believe, is the only 3 nodes that will push Atrophy and Call to the Slaughter to the front. But to get started, you just want only 8 nodes, and literally any second node will push Skeletal Atrophy to the front, which is annoying with other minion jewels if you're trying to craft, but in this case, it's fantastic. And you got room for 1 regular, medium, which with temporary minions, you always want these 2 nodes, your Life from Death and your Blessed Rebirth. That's 4 seconds of immunity. And what's really special about the Skele Archers, they started doing damage as soon as you see them pop up. Whereas melee does have to walk over, even with the minions are aggressive tag, if you get one of those expensive 40 div wands. even when they dash, you still have a little downtime. And then once the target dies, they have to move again. And that dash has a cooldown, so they're not just dashing constantly. So you end up with far better uptime. And even though they'll only target from a certain distance, like around here probably is where they wouldn't shoot at a target. They'd start walking that way. They'd sense it and start walking that way. With Pierce and Volley, those projectiles are gonna keep going. Getting all 4 seconds of damage uptime is going to be it makes a really big difference. So it's what it comes out to, and why I've enjoyed and came back and never made a second character this league and just kept grinding on this character. It just felt so good to play compared to the other minions. And I've played the SRS, Absolutions, Pure Spectres, Pure Zombies, other skeleton builds before. Skele Mages were fun. Skele Mages were kind of similar. I'd say that this is the most feels good variant I've put together. And this tree, of course, might look a little insane going all the way across here. But there's an important reason for all of it. First off, I have to cover this keystone, Corrupted Soul. So you're gaining energy shield out of your life, 15%. I actually ran with Replica Soul Tether for a little while, but Darkness Enthroned is a lot better. And your damage is being split. And one of these energy shield mastery nodes is all you need for 30% of chaos damage to go to the energy shield as well. As a result, you are needing to care about both your energy shield and your life, which is normally a bit of a problem, and you would be better off on like a Inquisitor or some kind of a Templar. I never remember that character. But your energy shield is fine because of Ghost Dance. So this is going to be evasion instead of armor. It's a lot more common these days. I wanted to build around evasion just because I've never built a minion evasion character before. And the evasion numbers aren't insane. However, if you go ahead and pop your flask, it goes up a good amount, and you're still seeing 70% estimated chance to evade. I don't know how much that drops against certain bosses or enemies with higher accuracy, but it's a nice healthy number. And that combined with your block and your spell block and your spell suppression and your raised maximum resists and Ghost Shroud, doing a very good job of keeping your energy shield up. And so your life ends up being a problem. There's not much natural regen on the character, which does make degens a little bit of an issue from time to time, except for Soul of Rasthatha, which we'll go ahead and run 2 1 instant and 1 just with increased recovery rate, 2 life flasks, and we can deal with Ignite. So normally you would consider Abrath, and I did try Abrath for a while, which was okay, because that 60% less Ignite is really strong, and you really don't worry about Ignites, and it's nice to ignore Burning Ground. But with Rasthatha and our Ignite immunity and removal of Ignite on the life flask, you're not even going to notice if it was Ignite that was getting you low. You're just going to hit the flask and it's gone. And Corrupted Blood on the other flask, and because of Rasthatha, we don't really need to pursue the immunity to Corrupted Blood or Ignite, and that actually covers those gaps very nicely. And especially in bosses like especially Cyrus, where you have almost no chance for flasks. I don't think you get any flask charges until you die. Rasthatha will keep your most important flasks up anyway. And that actually handles the life regen fine, actually extremely well, because you'll notice that life total, 3,833, is really low. If you didn't have energy shield, that would be a piece of paper. However, with the shield combined and splitting the damage, and the shield taking care of itself, and the life being so easy to manage with flasks, it comes out to be very comfy in most scenarios. And I'll go ahead and pull up the Ascendancy here. Pretty straightforward. It's a Necromancer, and this is one of those builds where you really do want to take advantage of Commander of Darkness. This is normally kind of not that great because it's mostly just a few extra suffixes, right? It's some extra resists, things you can normally take care of on your own, but it helps out a whole lot and leaves a lot of room for your gear. And in this case, we're running 4 auras, so we're getting some nice damage increase out of it. And there's just not much. It's either Plaguebringer or Mistress of Sacrifice. You could go Mistress of Sacrifice and Bone Offering and be a lot tankier, have much higher block chance, which would be nice if you were trying this in hardcore. That'd probably be a good idea, but I find it unnecessary, and I'd much rather run Flesh Offering instead of Bone Offering. And of course, with poison builds, you want chaos damage, Unholy Might, you gain 30%. That combined with 3 or even 4 Skeletal Atrophies makes it so that you get a lot more scaling of your damage out of adding flat physical damage to the skeletons instead of chaos damage, which is cheaper than trying to compete with the Poison SRS players buying up all the chaos damage gems or jewels. And then Bone Barrier, taking care of our guard skill, and bleed. You're close to immune to bleed. And yeah, there's buff grants immunity to bleeding, and just keep that on left click. And you end up not dying so quick that even if you aren't optimizing and hitting this right when you need to, if you're not, you don't need to really strategize. You just keep moving, and it'll do everything you need it to. You're not too fragile. What really helps is that additional physical damage reduction per minion, up to 10% for each minion you got. You're gonna run around with at least 5 and go over 10 real quick, and be over 10 all the time, especially with Val Summon Skeletons. So the Ascendancy is really straightforward. Poison damage will scale off of physical or chaos, but we have gems like, let me see, where are we at? Void Manipulation, for example. You get more scaling if it's all converted or gained as chaos, so much better off scale. You have a much better platform for scaling, and you get to take that abysmally low base damage that Skele Archers have, and some tools to bring that damage up to enough to clear Uber bosses and dense tough content. And I'll go over the support gems. Before you'll always have, well, you know, your Skeles. So you can just get any phantasmal summon skeletons and just use it. Make sure it's at 20%. And if you can't buy one that's already Val Skeles, you can just try to corrupt a bunch of them, level them up and corrupt. Pro tip, of course, 3 white socket, some cheap items. You can probably find some in the axe, maybe even, or go buy them for a few chaos. They're not so bad. So just level up your gems and corrupt them until you get at least a 20-20. Maybe you'll get a 19-20 if you're using the Temple Corrupt. But a 20-20 Val Summon Skeletons is what I ran with and cleared Uber bosses with, and it's fine enough. You want to get to the 21, but the +1 level is not actually that big of a deal. And like, if someone was going to sell one and you're going to buy it, you're spending like at least 15 divs on that, as opposed to maybe a couple divs for a 20-20. All the 20-20 gems I sold for 2 divs each, and I saw other people listing sometimes for 3 or 4 divs, and they just wouldn't sell. They'd be up for days and days, and only my 2s were selling. You'll go with minion damage, of course, and it does not have to be awakened minion damage, but you want to get 1 to level 5 eventually. That's going to be the first priority of your awakened gems. And Unbound Ailments, self-explanatory, makes their poison much stronger. Void Manipulation, already mentioned, and Pierce and Volley for mapping. And for single target bosses, there's a really big advantage to one of these gems. Vicious Projectiles is just the next best one. If your Dendrobate which I'll cover in a second, if your Dendrobate has white sockets, you'll get a little bit more damage out of a level 4 in power than you would if you have +1 corruption, than you would from vicious projectiles, I think. I'd have to double check POB, but that's not a big deal. If it's corrupted and you don't have your white sockets, just go with 3 blue and 3 green, which is it's a energy shield evasion chest anyway, so very cheap on the socket colors. You're not going to have to get a bunch of reds like you would with melee. And this gem I didn't roll with for a while, but this gem really elevates it. So someone on Reddit suggested that I try it out, and that the less damage, 60% less damage while returning, projectiles from supported skills deal less damage while returning, only applies to the hit damage. It doesn't affect the poison. So the poison is basically doubling every time it returns and comes back. You do need at least 1 pierce, and there's no natural pierce. So by far the best way to get this is with a divergent quality, which gives at 20% that 1 additional pierce, which is all you need for the returns to work. And if targets are moving, then the returning projectiles aren't going to hit them a second time, of course. So I don't know where to place the damage benefit of this, but I've tried before and after and found a noticeable difference. It's not the biggest thing in the world, but I'd estimate this gem is giving at least another 50% damage, more damage, maybe 60, maybe 70%. Maybe it depends. It probably depends entirely on how stationary the targets are, so much more on bosses potentially. That pierce, while using a single target setup, is very advantageous for boss fights such as Uber Duper Elder that have that spawn ads, all those portals and space ghosts that show up and octopuses. It makes a huge difference with the projectiles hitting more than once. You actually have a bit of clear speed. While you're mapping, you don't want to use this gem. It's okay, but the terrain blocks a lot of the returns and things are moving around a lot more, and I just go ahead and swap it, pierce and volley, and you damage is more than good enough, and you don't even have to swap gens for conquerors or guardians and stuff. Maybe if you're still getting built, you don't have your monomos yet. And that's it really for the sport gens. I'll go back to the passives real quick. So this being Corrupted Soul, Split, Energy Shield, and Life, you want to spread out this much because there's 3 wheels that give Energy Shield and Life percentage. This one especially, another 3% life gained as Energy Shield. And then it's just a nice 10% for both. I'll come back to Dendrobate after this. You also get to take advantage of 2 reservation wheels. I'll cover that reserving life real quick in a moment. And of course, you've got some good nodes. You've got your redemption, which is really good. You can path over here. And this also ends up being the best place to put your Glorious Vanity. You could buy a better Glorious Vanity, but they get kind of expensive. There's definitely people headhunting these things, and the best rolls are really rare. So this one, I don't know, I probably bought for like 30 chaos. I just wanted something usable here, and then set up some waiting to try and see if I can get a few good effects on these small nodes. It could really be a lot better. But what's critical is getting Corrupted Soul on a keystone where you don't have to spend extra points. Everything's nice and tidy in one little area. Depending on what you find, you might get to move some points around, take a little more advantage. Grabbing life. So because we're pathing all the way over to the right, we get to start over here. Grab a lot of jewels. Grab our minion cluster. Spell block and mana regen. Need 1 defensive cluster. Getting pathing over here saves you from having to path over to sacrifice, which is a big help. And over here we get our spell suppression and a wheel of hybrid energy shield and evasion. letting you get 1 mastery with 30% increased evasion while you have energy shield, which is going to be all the time. You will die of 0 life before you run out of energy shield. And that lets us have access to 2 clusters as well. We are next to Whispers of Doom, so you could make an alternate setup. I'll mention real quick, Vixen's Entrapment is what I use to get our 2nd curse and make it so we just only cast Temp Chains, and that immediately casts our Despair, which are both worth keeping. You definitely want 2 curses here. But if you go with like, probably not cast on hit, but Arcanist Brand or some other setup, you can maybe even do a Trigger Wand. I did not opt for a Trigger Wand. I'll come back to that. So maybe you can take advantage of Whispers of Doom and wear a nice, healthy, rare piece of gloves, but not necessary. And that's why this passes tree looks insane. Of course, you do need to get a hold of the nodes that give you +1 Skeles. And we'll anoint Grave Pact to cap our accuracy and get some double damage sometimes. I'll come up to Dendrobate. This is one of the main advantages of Skele Archers versus Poison SRS is that you don't want the Covenant, and the Covenant is way more expensive. So maybe if things change, you know, Dendrobate will get more expensive. But this is something that let me enjoy building this up when the league was early. Was that Dendrobate was a lot cheaper. It just started with a 5-link Dendrobate, just the cheapest one you could find. Socket it yourself. It's not too hard or expensive. You can farm it up in white maps. And reason being that Covenant, given that level 29, added Chaos. Again, added Chaos is not as efficient with this minion. You can actually get more effectiveness out of added Physical. And mostly you need the chance to poison. And this saves you a couple of those ghastly jewels that get really expensive with chance to poison. You have plenty of room. Like, for example, instead of this 4th mega, you're most likely going to put a jewel in here with minions have chance to poison. Because you just want to get that poison chance up to 100%, same as Poison SRS. And then Dendrobate itself is actually not a bad body armor. It's got a healthy amount of evasion and energy shield and some resists. And without a life modifier on it, you get to take advantage of the 15% life mastery. This is one build where you definitely want the skills cost life instead of 30% of the mana. Definitely one of those. Because skeletons are a little mana expensive. I'll come back to that. For reservation efficiency, oh, I don't have everything. There we go. Right now, my setup is overkill. Again, does not need to be level 4 Enlightened. Just level 3 is fine enough, or even level 2. If you get like a corrupted brick to level 2, people will sell super cheap. You take advantage of this bench craft, +2 to level of socketed support gems. We'll crank up that Enlighten to level 5 on a level 3, and it will connect to 2 of your auras. And for mana reservation, you'll just get a little bit everywhere you can. A helmet enchant would be very nice. On the Mega, you can get, if you find one with 2 nodes, that increase, but you want to prioritize Mortifying Aspect because Malevolence is not connected to Enlighten. So you get more mana saved out of this one as opposed to one for Grace or Haste. To handle the mana issues, a couple of rings with -7. And I've got one more aura running, which I find very worthwhile. Just get a level 21 Arrogant support. Quality doesn't matter. You just want level 21 because it gives the lowest cost multiplier. But just a level 1 Clarity, and take advantage of a Watcher's Eye mod for another. How does that scale? Yeah, it goes up to -10. for another minus mana cost while affected by clarity. And then Commander of Darkness gets you a little bit more attack speed for your minions, and yourself a little more cast speed, and you get a little bit more mana regen. And so here it's, wait a minute. Oh, duh. You can see you can always cast 3 in a row, and then mana's coming back quickly enough to just resummon about as much as you need. You need to get used to it, but it's pretty simple. And for auras, we're going with Grace for the evasion. Very obvious. Doesn't matter if you have quality, because you don't really worry about your minions having evasion. Haste. And you notice the haste is not connected to generosity. We've got that on our malevolence. Haste is very nice quality of life, letting it affect your character. You did get more damage if you put it on generosity, but it's more advantageous to connect it to the Enlighten, level 6 Enlighten. It only needs to be level 5. And in POB, if you check, there's actually no better damage aura anyway. There's nothing you would swap out for haste for better DPS. So might as well let it affect your character too, and enjoy being a bit speedier. Got some nice cast speed. Feels good to play. Malevolence is going to be the best damage aura. You just want that to affect your minions. It was later in the league, so I was able to buy a nice double corrupted Vixen's Entrapment. You don't need that, but it does help a lot to have an Awakened Generosity, give it another +1, and getting a... This is still only a 20/20. It could be a 21. Malevolence. And you do want quality and AoE on Malevolence, because sometimes you're a little far away from your minions and you want to make sure they get the effect. And we squeeze in Tempest Shield. Before you can afford Tempest Shield, you just roll with Defiance Banner, and it's good. Tempest Shield's just a good bit better, but you can't afford it until you've got some investment. This could be a much better Tempest Shield gem. Of course, you need Desecrate. Talk about the jewels real quick. Of course, the Big Daddy, the expensive one. I got this foil one for not any more expensive than the regular non-foils, but that's League for you. Amonimus Gaze, getting 30% damage over time multiplier. Just is like 15% more damage. I don't remember. That's huge. And for your Ghastlies, let me look at it. There we go. Evasion, life, or energy shield is nice to have. And you want to look for minions deal additional physical damage. You want to get tier 2 or tier 1, and you'll have to do the math and make sure that you have enough jewels to stack up poison chance, and that's where you'll take advantage of Darkness Enthroned. You do not need to spring for 7 or 8 div 100% Darkness Enthroned. You can get them. You can just get a legacy version at 75%, much cheaper, and I'm sure it's more expensive at the beginning of the league, but if you run Abyss nodes in your Atlas passives, you will find a lot of Darkness Enthrones. And doesn't need to be perfect, but I like knowing that... See, the problem is that it rounds down, so if it's like 90% increased effect, and this was a problem with the old 75% version too. 100% is just no breakpoints. Everything is completely doubled. There's, nowhere you need to worry about 15% versus 16%. You get a little extra. You just throw them in and they're twice as good. And that's why you want to put your poison jewels in the belt and do the math and figure out how much more you need in the tree. The minion chance to taunt you don't need. I just haven't replaced this jewel. You've already got Meat Shield on your Spectres and Golem. However, it's probably helping because the anytime the archers are taunting at range, they might be pulling the monster towards them, and then they get taunted again by the Spectre or Golem. Because Meat Shield gives them a much higher taunt chance. So maybe that is optimal. And it's at 14% chance to taunt. What's critical is chance to blind. You are an evasion build, so blind is very, very useful. As far as the rest of the flasks go, I already covered the life flasks. Just a Quicksilver with at least 50% reduced free chill effect to bounce back to Pantheons. Soul of the Brine King, always a good choice for any build that doesn't get this stuff for free. So you don't care about Frozen. With Tempest Shield, you're immune to shock, and 50% reduced effect of chill. Combined with that on the Quicksilver. You don't have to do it this way, but I did. And basically, whenever you feel like you're slowing down, that's when you're chilled. You pop the Quicksilver, and not only are you moving faster, but you're suddenly no longer affected by the chill anyway. And plays out really nicely. And for the other two flasks, going with Automation, use when charges reach full, which goes nicely with Soul of Ristlatha, because otherwise your life flasks might take some of those charges if they're topped off. Then your utility flasks will fill up faster and sustain better. And actually, I don't need that suffix. I need to re-roll this flask. This flask sucks. But 1500 evasion and spell suppress and phasing, very nice. So while mapping, if you just keep moving, this will stay up. This will stay up. I don't need that prefix. Gain 3 charges. What was? I think I just kept it because it was, yeah, it's tier 1. I need to re-roll both of these flasks. These are not optimal. I'll move over to the wand. I'm not a big crafter, but you can just throw bound fossils and maybe faceted for the increased gems. I don't know what I don't know the optimal way to build one of these, but considering that everything else is so cheap, hardly moves your mana. You can cast almost everything as much as you need. And you don't need to resummon these Skeles that often. You end up with enough downtime that it feels fine to just manually ritual. Especially in mapping, of course, there's corpses everywhere. So we don't need what most minion builds go for, and that is the trigger mod. So if you find a wand with +2 and some minion attack speed or some minion damage or both, or a +1 wand with minion damage and minion attack speed, and maybe even an open suffix or prefix for you to craft something else, and some cast speed too, it's a nice luxury stat. That's going to cost a lot less than those pristine 40, 30, 50 div wands that have the trigger craft, especially not the Aisling craft. Which is a nice bonus. That's the kind of thing I look for in a niche build, where you don't need the most expensive version of something you're looking for. You would be happy to buy something that's being sold as a byproduct, as they're trying to craft their ideal item, and then they get something good enough to sell, and so they just sell that and start over. And you pick up that garbage. It is your treasure. Gloves covered, so Vixen's Entrapment. Again, you don't need the double corrupt, but it is nice to get, and it becomes cheap later in the league. And you just put the Despair in there. It's better to put the Despair in the gloves than Temp Chains, and just make Temp Chains the one that you manually cast, because you prefer to have Evasion Boots, and Green Socket's easier. 4 socket. I mean, you can do it with the bench, but it's pain. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter. You can make either Temp Chains or Despair your manual. Boots, you'll notice, is just stats. Found Dexterity on here. You are going to need 159 Dexterity in order to have your level 21 auras. And you want that move speed. 35% move speed would be nice. While you're shopping, I just always look for 3 good stats when I'm on budget, and then work my way to up to 4 good stats, and room to craft a little more spell suppression. Evasion base. Feels interesting wearing evasion items on a minion build. I'll move up to the rings, actually. Should have started covering those sooner. Well, the rings, you see the minus mana costs. You do need 2 bone rings in order to cap off the minion resists. This will cap off with the +8 maximum, or max out the resists on all your minions and keep them safe. And you can definitely get better rings. I tried to Redeemer Slam this one, which is funny on a bone ring that can naturally roll better minion damage anyway, but when you Redeemer Slam a prefix, there's a chance to get that minion damage, like 20 to 30%, somewhere around there. Didn't get it. Got the cold damage against Shield of Frozen enemies. So realistically, with this build being over on attributes and resists, I should replace this rings. And so you're just looking for stats. Your resists, life, dex, maybe strength. And the amulet, you do have a choice between an amulet like this with +1 max skeletons or Replica Dragonflight. Replica Dragonflight in PoB does give a little more damage. It's not huge, but you're at 12 skeletons with a +1 or 11 skeletons that have +3 gem levels. And that comes out to, I think it was like another 10%, 20%. Not 20%. I think it was only about 10% damage. I looked at it. But you get better stats, though, off the rare. Same annoying either way. Replica Dragonflight does give some other nice stuff, like reduced attribute requirements, mana reservation efficiency, and all resists. But no life or energy shield, besides the +16 attributes from being an Onyx. So I find a lot more value just getting a rare with plus max skellies. But if skeletons do become more popular in a future league, then maybe the price will be different. Right now, Replica Dragonflight with plus to skeletons is super cheap, and you can buy one with good rolls for like a div or less. And that's probably just a fine way to go as well. Helmet, again, just going to be stats. And if you saw, of course, taking advantage of Eater and Syrian Exarch implicits. You just want to go for comfy stats, some max resist, poison avoidance, mana reservation available on the helmet, and Despair Curse effect. And that leaves the shield, which, nice thing about this build is that I finally got to get a shield that's just nice and thick and doesn't have very specific requirements. And it doesn't have to be an Aegis Aurora. Aegis Aurora wouldn't be good here because it's not an armor stacker. You just look for that chance to block spell damage is really good. That could also be spell suppression, a lot of life, the mana we don't care about, a good resist roll, and then getting +2 maximum to all maximum resists. So nice to just get from a rare item. It's so nice to have room for just a nice beefy shield. Could be a better base. I would prefer an evasion base, but the kite shield is fine enough. You do get a little energy shield off of it. And then you just need that open prefix. Or I think maybe you can unveil the same thing, but you need the +2 socketed support gems. That's where you're going to put your Enlighten into two of those auras. All right. I think that covers everything. So I've been playing on and off and sometimes not finding a lot of time to play, and I'll just kind of grind when I do. Did a bunch of Sanctums, but ended up doing a lot more maps with Incursion and just stacking up a ton of tomes. I could sell off a lot of stuff, but again, I don't have anything I want to buy with it. I don't get to play much. I'm not going to get to play much at all very soon. Gonna be too busy. So yeah, just wanted to do that overview, and again, I just found it very comfy, and I kept coming back and just wanting to play it, and ended up, I've never, 98 I think was the highest I ever got a character, and this is the first one I've gotten to 99. It was just fun to play, and I could do any content I wanted to try, and did some simulacrums, but got bored of that real quick. Did a few Uber Cyruses, and yeah, it's Just gonna say at this point, it's a recommend. Even if you like Poison SRS, I would recommend trying this version out. One of the main advantages of a poison-based build being that you don't care about reflect. That is going to be one advantage of a 4th Skeletal Atrophy, is that you only have 90% phys converted, and so 10% of the damage is still physical. It won't be much, but they will still take damage in a phys reflect map. And they'll usually not die anyway, because they're going to be attacking while in the 4 seconds of immunity from Blessed Rebirth, but then after that, they'll die off a little faster. And you care a lot less about most map mods. You don't care about any map mods that affect your damage, of course. You can be enfeebled all day. You have room to stack enough resists that you don't care about curses. Even temp chains on the map, while you do feel a little slower, you still have enough inherent speed with the haste buff that temp chains maps are fine, and that doesn't affect the DPS of your minions anyway. It only affects the player. And because it's not like SRS where you always want to count to 20 and you keep checking and making sure you're at 20, you're summoning 4 skeletons at a time, and you only need to cast 3 times to know that you have all 12. So it's a high downtime, very easy and comfy, and by stacking, just spreading out the defenses, it's one of the most spread out, kind of unfocused defensive setups I've ever seen, and it just comes out pretty fine. You're going to be evading and blocking and suppressing most everything, and recovering easily, and having enough flask charges to pop your life flasks whenever you need them, and then having a naturally low life pool, making those flasks extremely effective. Normally only getting 979 life on an instant recovery is, I don't even like instant flasks most of the time, but on this character it usually tops you off. Just a recommend, and leave any comments or questions. If you want to give it a try, let me know how it goes. I'd be happy to help anybody out if you have any questions, or if you make it better. I'm sure there's room to raise the ceiling on this one. So thanks for watching.